All right, so last week we talked about building a skeleton and connecting it up to our character. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again. I grab the, uh, the highest joint in the hierarchy first, shift select the geometry, and then close this. We go into skin and bind skin and the option box. And in my case, I'm going to do joint hierarchy. I'm going to use heat map just because it's a little faster for me for the demonstration. Remember, max influences, you want to keep that low so that you have a minimum number of joints that will influence any particular vertex. And then turn off maintain max influences. You'll see why we're doing that here in just a minute. And then we're going to hit bind skin. And it'll think for a second. And it binds the skin, and then we grab this, and when we rotate it, now that the joints are bound, the geometry moves with it. So it is awesome. By the way, if you enjoy this process, if you enjoy doing rigging, setting up characters and stuff, I would strongly encourage you to pursue it as aggressively as you possibly can. This is one step in the process that most 3D artists do not enjoy. It tends to be a little more on the technical side of things rather than the creative side of things. So it's not something that creative types tend to go to naturally.
Looks fun.
That
looks fun.
Yeah, it can be. It can also be hugely frustrating. If you want to explore this a little bit more, we have a class in the fall called Introduction to Rigging, where we delve into all kinds of. This is really basic, by the way. The weight painting we're going to do tonight and the rigging that we'll be doing when we come back is really basic stuff. It's just enough to get your character up and running so that you can animate with them. You can get very, very complex with these things, and there's a lot of interconnection and driving certain values with moving one thing with the value from another thing, and it's a whole big area. And if you really get into it and you really enjoy it, it's a great way to get your career started. It's not easy to get in to a game company or a studio as a rigger. It's easier than if you're trying to get in as an animator. So everybody wants to be an animator, but if you got an affinity for rigging and you enjoy doing it, I would encourage you to give it a shot, because it's a good rigger is worth their weight in gold. Not that they pay you like that. More of a metaphor than anything else. So here's our character with the joints inside, and when we rotate this, you can see that the character's moving with it, but we've got some issues. The geometry is sort of collapsing in on itself a little bit here. It's because the settings that we chose meant that there's only one joint influencing the vertexes in that elbow area. So here's where we got to go a little bit conceptual. So stick with me. I'm going to step over here. And we're talking a little bit about joint weighting. So for every joint in a character, spell that right? Yes. For every joint in a character, there is an area of influence. Okay? Joints only influence vertexes. It'll look like they're influencing faces and edges and whatnot, but the influence happens on the vertex, which then drives the edge and the face. Make sense? Okay. Now, for every vertex, there is a total influence value of 1.0. So every vertex has to have an influence value of 1 from some joint that's in the rig. It can be from one joint, it can be from multiple joints, but the total value of influence on every vert in the model is value of 1. Okay? It cannot be otherwise. It can't be more, it can't be less. Excuse me. So, for example, with our elbow there that we were seeing, right now, most of the vertexes in that elbow are being influenced, or in that area are being influenced by the elbow joint. But there are some that aren't. And those are the ones that are not moving when I rotate this. Let me do this. View, shading, wireframe unshaded. So when I rotate this, you can see that there are some here. These guys, all of these verts here, are moving when I rotate this elbow joint. These right here aren't. They're not being influenced at all. So why is that? Because when we set it up, we set our max influences to 1. So we said, all right, for any joint in this, or for any vertex in this setup, it can, at the outset, it can only be influenced by one joint. And that's to make things easier on us as we dig into what we're about to do. If we did multiple joints, then we have to figure out how much weight is on a particular vertex from all those multiple joints. We can spread this influence around across multiple joints, but we really want to be in control of that. We don't want Maya making these decisions for us because really it's bad at it. It doesn't understand wrist, elbow, knee, shoulder. It doesn't understand any of that. It just understands where the joint is in relation to the vertex, and it makes its best guess. And its best guess is usually bad. So, so what we need to do is decide how much influence any particular joint is going to have on any particular vertex, and do we need influence from multiple joints on a particular vertex? So, the thing that's important to keep in mind is you have to have a value of 1. Whether it's one joint or spread over multiple joints, the value has to add up to 1. Now Maya does all this for you. You don't have to sit there with a calculator and figure it out. But it does have to add up to 1. And that's important. I'll get a little bit more into that as we get a little more into this. A lot of times there'll be some movement that's undesired, and people are going to remove influence, and you're not removing it, you're placing it somewhere else. You're not erasing it, you're moving it to another joint. You don't know where. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes. All right. So we got kind of an idea of what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. I lose you at this point, then the rest of the evening is it's like I'm speaking Greek. So I could do this in Greek. Anybody interested? No, I can't. I'm lying. I couldn't possibly do that. All right. So, how are we gonna move this around? So we're gonna use our paint skin weights tool here. Now we're painting weights on the geometry. We're not painting weights on the joints. So we're gonna select our geometry. And in the rigging menu set, under skin, we're going to go paint skin weights, and there's an option box, so it's always a good idea to jump on that. This just shows us what we're looking at. So these are all of our joints in their hierarchy, right? So we got hip 1, knee 1, ankle, et cetera, all the way down here. And if we take a look here, you can see that our surface has it's changed color, it's black, right? So if this is our character's left elbow, So we're going to scroll down here until we find elbow left. And we click on that, and we get this map. This is a map of the influence that this joint currently has over the vertexes in its vicinity. Okay? The white color means it has 100% influences, sorry, 100% influence on the vertexes that fall within this white area. The black means it has 0 influence on any of the vertexes that fall in this black area. So this is 100%, this is 0%. See this gray right here? This transitional gray that's happening right there? The gray is some value between 0 and 1. So you can have 0 means no influence, 1 means total influence. If you have gray underneath a vertex in the middle of this polygon, it doesn't make any difference at all, except later on when you smooth the geometry, but that's a different story. So when this gray appears under a vertex, that lets us know that there's some value between 0 and 1 that vertex is being influenced. And this is where we have to start moving some values around to get a smoother transition. Okay? So if this is being influenced not at all by this joint, so these vertexes here are not being influenced at all by this joint, right? Because they have black underneath them. So which joint do you think has the influence over these vertexes?
The one in the gray and the white. Shoulder.
Shoulder? Yep, yeah. So we go up to the shoulder, and this shows us what the shoulder's influencing, right? So the shoulder is influencing these vertexes here. That's why when we bend that elbow, that it folds up, because we're rotating the elbow, we're not rotating the shoulder. So the shoulder says, well, I'm in charge of these and I'm not moving them. And then we get that fold. There's also a little bit of influence down here under the armpit. So if we were to take this joint and rotate it, watch what happens. See how the side of that character just collapses? Because this vertex is being influenced by that shoulder joint. Make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody with me? Okay. So when you're going around and you're changing the influence on your joints, sometimes you want to move influence entirely off of one joint and onto another. Sometimes you want to split the difference. Sometimes you want to move a little bit of influence from another joint onto a vertex so that you get a smoother transition. Now here's the good news about this whole the vertex has to equal 1 thing. Let's say that I'm over here and I'm painting my weights and I'm at elbow left, and I want to add some influence here so that this doesn't just stay rigid, that it moves a little bit. We don't want it to move a lot. We just want it to move a little bit so that things don't fold in on themselves, right? So if I add a little bit of influence here, and if these have to equal 1, if the value of the vertex has to equal 1, if I add maybe, I don't know, let's say 0.25 influence to this. So it's about 25% influence, right? From this, if I add it to this joint, if I add 25% influence to this for this joint, what's that going to do to the influence of the shoulder joint if everything has to equal 1? It's going to take it away. Exactly. It's going to take it away from the shoulder joint. So let's do that. All right. When you're in the paint tool, you see this red circle that we've got here? This is a 3-dimensional painting paradigm. So it's basically a paintbrush that conforms to the surface of your object. So as you move over the object, it'll orient itself to be on the surface of the object. There are 4 types of paint operations. there are replace, scale, add, and smooth. So there are two that you want to use. There's one that you want to avoid, and then there's one you want to use only when you're absolutely done. So let me tell you what they do. Replace, and you can always tell which one you're currently using because you've got the little, see the letter there? See the R in the brush? It tells you using the replace brush. What the replace brush does is it takes whatever the value is here, right now it's 1, and replaces whatever's there with that value. So if we wanted to make this 100% elbow, we could take our, I'll show you how to scale that in just a sec. We take our replace brush and paint over that vertex and see how it went totally white underneath it. So that took the value that was there, which was 0, and replaced it with 1. So now if we look at the shoulder left, look there. We took it all away from the shoulder and gave it to the elbow. See how it's black underneath now? So we don't want to do that. We'll just undo that. So the value down here is the value that you're going to be adding or replacing with when you use the replace brush. So the key to this is to make sure that you always replace with a value that's higher than what's already there. And I'll get to the why in a second. You always want to be higher. The add value, you can see it's got an A. This one I'm going to show you a little bit differently. I'm going to crank it down to about 25%. This takes whatever's there and adds this value to it up to a value of 1. So if I've got it at, oh, that's opacity. That's not what I wanted. So we're about 25%. If I paint on this vertex with this add brush, see how it goes a little bit gray? You guys see that? You see it change? Undo. See there's a little bit of gray there now? Now if I go over it again, I add another 25%. If I go over it again, it adds another 25%. It's getting brighter and brighter. And then one more time, and now we're at 100%. And I can go over it as much as I want now. It won't change anymore because the value of that vertex is now 1. So now it's tied entirely in to that elbow joint. Does it make sense? We all good? All right. So we'll back off of that. Okay. So those are the two you want to use. Replace, you want to make sure that you're always replacing with a higher value. Add, you want to make sure it will just add whatever the value is up to a value of 1. The profile is the way that the brush behaves. So this particular brush right here has very, whatever the value is that you have set here is 100% in the center, and it has a fall off range. So if you're painting with that brush, when you're in the center of this brush, kind of where the crosshairs are, it'll hit that value 100%, and then as you get closer to the edges of that brush, the value will fall off until it gets to 0. So that's a little unpredictable in terms of what you're putting on there. The one next to it, this guy right here, same kind of thing, just a little bit faster fall off. It does, you know, it's got a heavier spot in the center, and there's a little bit quicker fall off. This brush right here is the one that I tend to use, and this is the, whatever the value is here, it is consistent throughout the entire circumference of the brush, the entire area that the brush covers. And that way, that's a good way to know for sure that you're getting the value that you want. Because sometimes, you know, you're painting over multiple, if you're painting over multiple vertexes like this, you know, you want to make sure that you're getting the same value on both vertexes. And if you're using one of these fall off brushes, you may be getting something other than what you think you're getting. Make sense? I hope. This brush is the same as this one, except it has a square area of influence. There's, you know, it's a little more precise sometimes. Frankly, I change the size of my brush to make sure that it's precise. To change the brush size, once you're in here, you hold down the B key, and you get this the double-headed arrow that you see there, and then just left mouse click and drag, and you can make it larger, you can make it smaller, you can dynamically change the size of that however you like. Okay? Now, I mentioned before, with replace, you want to make sure that the value that you replace with is higher than the value that already exists on that vertex. So a reasonable question is why, Paul? Why? And the answer is, remember, every vertex has to have a value of 1. You can't erase value. It has to be assigned somewhere, right? So it's either on the one joint or it's on multiple joints. If you replace with a lower value than what's already there, that amount that is the difference between those two, that value has to go someplace. It has to go to it has to be assigned to some other joint. Okay, that makes sense? The problem is, when you do that, you don't know where it goes. It just goes. Maya makes its best guess. Sometimes it nails it. A lot of the time it doesn't. And what happens is, if you get in there and you start trying to lower values, remove values, et cetera, what happens is Maya just starts reassigning that amount that you're lowering to random joints. And you end up with a model that in this view ends up looking like a Dalmatian. There's little white speckles and black speckles everywhere. And then you rotate an elbow and all of a sudden his earlobe is moving. Because it's been reassigned, that weight has been reassigned to the head joint, which controls his earlobe. This guy doesn't have any earlobes, but it's a metaphor, okay? So you always want to make sure that you're replacing with a value that's higher than what's already there. How do you tell what's already there? Whoops. Elbow. Oh, there we are. With this little guy right here. This eyedropper. So here's our value, right? Right now it's around 0.25. If we want to see what's at this location, we just hit the eyedropper, come over here with our cursor, click on that vertex, and it'll automatically set this value to whatever we just clicked on. We want to check this one, click on the eyedropper, click there, it goes to 1. So if you got, let's say you're going to do something with this one right here, and you want to bump that up. You get this, you click there, you find out it's 0.42, you go, oh, I really want it to be about 5. Crank it up there like that, and then here you go. You can increase it that way. But Paul, you say, there are going to be times, I know, because I'm thinking ahead. There are going to be times where the value on a vertex is too high. I need to reduce it. It can't have that much influence over that joint can't have that much influence over a particular vertex. If I can't reduce the value, how do I reduce the influence? Anybody want to take a stab at it? If you can't reduce it on the one joint, what can you do to lower the influence? You said the quiz wasn't until after lecture. So again, we're going back to our 1.0, right? It always has to be 1. So if we wanted to, let's say we want to reduce the value, here's a good one. So the elbow shouldn't be influencing this as much as it is, right? We really kind of already touched on it. This is the wrist, so the wrist joint really should be influencing these. So if we go to the wrist, if we want to reduce the amount of influence that the elbow has on that, all we have to do is add value with the wrist joint selected, and then when we go back to the elbow joint, you can see that it's been reduced. So remember, it has to equal 1. If you add more to another joint, it automatically removes it from the joint that it's currently assigned to. Make sense?
I wasn't here last week, but are you talking 1 has to equal 1 for each joint or a total of all the joints?
For every vertex.
For
Every
vertex.
vertex has a value of 1.
Okay.
You can spread that out over multiple joints, as I'm going to do in just a second here. I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. But I was just kind of hitting the highlights. It all kind of ties together. You might need to watch this video a couple of times, frankly. When I started teaching this class, this is a huge part of rigging. This is, in order to get your character to look good and to form right, this is a massive part of rigging. You have to spend time on this. And when I started teaching the class, there was literally no information about how to do this. I could find nothing about how to do this. I knew the concepts, but I didn't know how it worked in Maya. And after a couple of semesters, I went, you know what? I'm writing a tutorial. That's what I'm going to do. I'll put it up online so that people can use it. And it worked out pretty well. You know, the number of questions dropped off dramatically. Students were able to get their stuff done. The tutorial is still, by the way, part of the course materials. It's a PDF you can download and read through. A lot of the imagery is a little older because it's previous versions. I haven't updated it. But all the concepts are still the same. Some of the menu calls are a little different too, but you'll find them. And that tutorial actually got me my first book deal. It's like, I went around to all these, I was at a trade show, went around to all the publishers and went, why don't you have a good, beginning Maya book? And they all went, eh. And one of them went, well, why don't you write one? I went, challenge accepted. So I sent them my tutorial as an example, and then I heard nothing for 6 months and went, okay, whatever. And then all of a sudden, I was going to actually write a book for this class, just for use in this class. And they emailed me and said, hey, how'd you like to write one for us? I went, write it myself for no money. And then, bind it with a comb bind and sell it in the bookstore. Or major publisher wants to pay me to write it, and it'll make my mom happy. So went with making mom happy. And then I got to write a couple books. Something I never thought I'd do. And something that horrifies my friends. They're like, they let you write a book? I don't know what to tell you, man. All right, so enough about my personal history. All right, so we had this guy right here. We were looking at him before, this elbow joint. Keep coming back to it because it's easy to do. We've got this folding that's going on, and that's not good. We really don't want that when the character starts moving around. We want it to be as smooth a deformation as it can possibly be. So we're going to reweight this a little bit so that it plays a little nicer. The first thing we want to do is you always want to have a transition out of a joint area. You don't want to have a hard stop. And right now we've got a hard stop. Fortunately, it goes all the way around just fine. It goes around the centerpiece just fine. But we want to have a nicer transition here. We want to have this move a little bit when the elbow joint rotates. Not a lot, but enough so that it doesn't really end up on itself. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to give it maybe 0.25. I tend to work in percentages of 25s initially. 25%, 50%, 75, 100. Because that'll get the base blocking in. And then if I need to refine it further, I can go into like 10%, 15%, what have you. Okay, so I'm going to go 25%. I've got my replace. I can see that it's black underneath this, so I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to be replacing with a higher value. And then I'm just going to go all the way around, take my paint tool. By the way, you want to do this when you're in polygon view. You don't want to do this in smooth, the smooth proxy view. And I'll show you why. I'm going to put my cursor right on top of that vertex intersection. And then we smooth it out. See how far over the appearance of that vertex intersection jumped? If I'm over here trying to paint, nothing's going to change because I'm not actually on top of the vertex. Right? You have to be right on the vertex in order to paint it. So if you're painting in smooth proxy and it's not changing, it's because you're not actually on the vertex. So switch back to, hit 1, go back to polygon view, and that'll work a lot better for you. Now we can take a look at this. Rotate this. See how much nicer that is? Look at that. Still not great, but it's better, right? We're not getting, it's not collapsing as quickly. All right, so what we can do now is actually take some of this center piece right here and reduce that influence down so that it doesn't move quite as far when we rotate it. Excuse me, right now it's at 100%. Let's say we want to take it to about 50%, right? We only want it to move about 50% as far. It's at 100%. We can't replace it with 0.5 because that would take, whoops, because that would take fully half of what's here and reassign it to some other joint. Which joint? Don't know. Whichever one Maya feels like assigning it to. But we can come in here, get our shoulder joint, and by the way, let me show you this. Sample, and here's the one we just painted over. We'll sample right there. See how it's 0.75? Used to be 1 because that's all of the weight for that vertex was assigned to the shoulder. When we added 0.25 to the elbow, it pulled it away from the shoulder. It does it automatically. All right, so we'll go 0.5 here, come around this. See how my brush is small enough so it's not overlapping other vertexes? You want to be careful of that. If I had a giant brush like this and I went like that, now all of it is 0.5. And I've taken some weight and just thrown it out into the ether. I don't know where it went. And nothing is more annoying than chasing those tiny weights. Okay. So now we've got, I added 0.5 to the shoulder joint, which means that the elbow now, I'm just going to mess this up so you can see. If I grab this center row of verts here, see now it's 0.5. So half of it is on the shoulder, half of it's on the elbow. Make sense? And if we grab this and we rotate it, see now we're getting a much nicer rotation. We're still getting a little folding here, and we could go ahead and play around with that a little bit more if we wanted to, just to kind of get it looking good. Yeah, we could take this and you usually want to go up. You want to, if you're going to add weight to take away, you want to go up to the previous joint. The higher joint, the joint higher in the hierarchy. Why? Because when you rotate that joint, if I rotate the shoulder joint, the elbow's going along with it, right? If I move the shoulder, the elbow's going to go along with it. So any weight for the shoulder that's moving that row of vertexes, when the shoulder moves, is also going to move with the elbow because the elbow's going along with it. If we put a little weight on the wrist, then when we rotate the wrist, those vertexes at the elbow are going to move, and that doesn't look natural. Okay? Does that make sense? Just go up the hierarchy, trust me. All right, so we're going to go back to our shoulder. We'll go 0.25 here. There we are. Zoom in. Put a little 2.5 right here at the very last section here on the at the elbow connection. And let's see what we got. Look at that, huh? That looks pretty good. It starts to crease about where you'd want the arm to start to crease. You know, when you've got a 90-degree angle, that's about where you're, you know, where the lower arm starts to bump into the upper arm, and that's where you want it to start creasing. So we've got, you know, a fairly nice piece right here. Now I want to mention too that I'm not expecting you guys to get this perfect. This can be a very time-consuming task. It can literally eat up an entire week trying to get this right. What I'm looking for in your models is evidence that you made an effort to get the weights right. If it doesn't turn out 100% perfect, it's fine. I'm not worried about it. You know, you're doing an absolutely perfect job. That's for the rigging class. When you take the rigging class, we'll worry about that. But I want to see that you've got the concept here, right? Especially considering that we're rapidly approaching the downhill side of the semester, and I don't want people stuck on this for like 3 weeks. So just get it as clean as you can, as quickly as you can. Don't hesitate to ask questions of me or the lab assistants, and then we'll move on to rigging and animation in the subsequent weeks. Now, a couple other things. Over here, I'm painting away. I've got this lovely thing. I'm going to fix this just a little bit here because it's a little easier to tell what's going on. So I'm going to get rid of this shoulder and this underneath this armpit here. I'm just going to take those and I'm going to attach them to, where are we? Spine 2. Sure, put it on spine 2. Just going to turn that up to 100%. Go like that. And we'll go like that. This is not what I would necessarily do, but for the sake of demonstration, shoulder left. See, so I took all of that weight away from the shoulder, so now when I rotate the shoulder, that the side no longer collapses in, and I don't get pulling on the top. So that's all good. But really the reason I did it was this. We look here, so here's our nice nifty arm, right? We got a little bit of a fade. It's gradually falling off towards the wrist. That's all really nice. There's a whole other arm that goes with it, right? Whole other arm. And what does that arm look like right now? Oops. What does that arm look like right now? So we look at the shoulder, elbow right. It looks exactly the same as the one we just did, right? Oh God, Paul, do I have to repaint this side too? No, you don't. As long as your character's straddling the center line, as long as he's centered on the shot, right? And if you're using the character I provided, he definitely is. As long as half of him's on one side and half of him's on the other, there's a tool here you can use that will take care of this for you. So we'll just leave that up so you can see what's going on. And under skin, we've got our mirror skin weights tool. And I'm going to grab this. And we want to make sure that we check these really carefully. How to determine which axis to mirror across. It's always the two axes that make up the vertical. You know, if you're looking straight down it would be the two axes that make up the vertical. So in this case, it would be the Y, because that's the upright, and then the Z, which is the depth axis. So YZ, that's usually how it goes. Positive to negative. So these little handles always point in the positive direction. So I was working on the positive side of this character for this elbow, and I want to mirror it over to the negative side. So that's fine. If you ended up working on this side and you wanted to mirror over, all you have to do is uncheck that, and then it'll mirror the other way. Closest point on surface is what we want. And then we're going to hit mirror and watch what happens to the elbow. Boom. So now all of our weights are mirrored over, just like they are on this side. And if we look at the shoulder, see that little bit that was under here and the little bit that was on the top that I moved to the spine? Those are mirrored as well. So it basically takes it takes this center line right here, takes everything you do on this side and mirrors it over to the other side. So you really only have to work on one side of your character to get the weights correct, and then you can just mirror it all over. All right, one other thing to show you that will help you speed this process up. Let's take a look here at our head. So our head's all bendy, and that's wonderful. But we've got this point that's staying behind. We got another point that's not behaving well, and we probably want the neck to move a little bit too while we're at it, right? When the head tilts back, we don't want the neck staying stiff. We want it to kind of stretch a little bit. So we could. One way you can do this is take your, close that, paint skin weights, boom. Take the head, and by the way, this shows exactly why you want to rename all your joints as you put them in. Because if this was, joint 27, joint 28, joint 29, what is that, right? But I can go straight to the head joint, right? Get this, select our model, skin, paint skin weights. Oops. Object mode. What's going on? Why are you misbehaving? We're almost done. Stop it. Oh, that would be why. I didn't select it before I went into paint skin weights. There we go. All right. So you can see here, this vertex doesn't have any weight on it for the head, which we'd want to fix pretty quickly. Paint skin weights. The option box up. Values at 1. We'll take care of that. But we also want to add some minor influence here. Now we could do it by selecting a value, make it like a 0.5, and paint that in, and then rotate this and see what effect that has, and then go back and tweak it. But when your character's in their neutral pose, there's no rotation value. Everything's at 0. There's no rotation value, so you can't really see what effect your weight painting is having. So one trick to speed things up is you take the joint and you rotate it just a little bit. This is why you want to have all of your rotations at 0, right? They want to be baselined at 0 so that you can reset them. But if we rotate it just a little bit, and then we come in here to our paint skin weights tool, and we have it set at 0.5, and we select our head joint. Oops, again, I forgot to select this before I did that. My bad. There we go. So there's our, now it's showing our weights. So the head's selected. If I come in here with my replace at 0.5 and I paint on this, watch what happens. See how the vertex moves? See how it jumps up a little bit? So that's going to show you, with the joint slightly rotated, it's going to show you exactly what kind of influence putting that amount of weight on that vertex will do for you. Right, so now I know that this is going to rotate a little bit. It's got kind of since I've got the head tilted back, that edge loop is going to be part of that tilt. That make sense? So now when I rotate it, see how it's a little more flexible? And then when I'm done with that, I can just come over here and grab my value, reset it to 0, and I'm okay. Same thing down here with the neck. Let's actually we'll take this, we'll rotate the neck slightly, And see the chest coming up there? We don't want that at all. But we'd fix that by adding influence to the chest, to one of the spine joints. But if we want to do something similar with the neck, grab this, back into our paint weights, and we come up here into spine 3, add a little bit of weight to spine 3. We're going to skip that one because it's white, right? It's brighter than what I'm doing, so I don't want to hit that because it'll remove the weight. I'm just going to skip over that for now. And we'll come back and fix that later. So I'm adding a little bit to that. Not really sure where most of the weight is. Huh, okay. Well, we could fiddle around with that. And now when I've got the neck, and I rotate the neck, so the base of the neck rotates a little bit with the body. We're going to get rid of that because it's annoying. And it's a really great example. If I rotate the neck a little bit, I'm going to grab this, go back into my, this is our, I've been using this, by the way, I didn't say a word about it. This slot in the toolbox is the previously used tool. So rather than having to go up here to, skin, paint skin weights, blah, 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 every time. Once you've activated it the first time, unless you change tools, it'll be right here. So when you rotate a joint, you can just come over here and click on that, and it'll reopen all of the paint skin weight stuff. So now that's on our neck. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on, what joint is that? This is spine 3. So I want it on spine 3. So I'm going to take this, get this tool, I'm going to select spine 3, and I'm going to replace, let's go to like 75%. I'm going to replace the value here with like 75% on spine 3, and see how that drops right down there. It drops it right back to where it should be. And now when I rotate the neck joint, it's only influenced a little bit. You would still want it to be influenced a little because, when you raise your neck up, this part of your chest goes up. That's maybe a little bit too much. I might want to go in and, like I said, I do 25% up to 1. And then if it needs further refining, I'll go into smaller increments. It's making sense, gang? We're all good? Or you're not good, but you're just not saying anything because you're afraid everybody else got it and you didn't. So that's the idea. Like I said, it's a little technical, it's a little sort of geeky, but it's definitely something that that is an absolutely necessary step in the rigging process in order for your characters to deform nicely so that they look good when you're animating them. Any questions? Okay. So then the only thing left to do is talk about the assignment. So you're going to use the stuff we talked about tonight. You're going to paint weight adjustments on your character to create nice deformations. And please note, I don't want you to get it perfect. It's enough to show that you know what you're doing and you've got the concept under your belt. This takes a lot of time. So it can be very tedious. Oh, the other thing I want to show you, I forgot about. Once you got something the way you like it, let's say you're here, and you go back in, and you've decided that you really like the way that that elbow left works. Excuse me. Hit this little lock button right there. Boom. When it lights up and closes, that value is now locked into that joint. When you go to to adjust other joints, it won't draw from there, it won't put any weight there, it won't do anything to that joint once you lock it up. Now, the thing that always gets people every semester is they lock every joint but one, and then they try and change that joint. Try and change the value on that joint. How many joints do you need to have unlocked in order to change the value? At least 2. So don't lock everything up and then try and change the value on that last joint, because it won't work. Because it doesn't have anywhere to put that weight. It just goes, oh, you can paint on this all day long. I'm just going to put it back. You know, it'd be nice if Maya talked to us sometimes, like Siri does or what have you. That won't work, Paul. I'm like, do it anyway, Siri. Okay, but you're just going to do it again. Just got a bad attitude, really. Anyway, yeah, lock them up when you're done. Especially a really good place to use that is when you're doing fingers, because fingers can get really dicey. You know, getting the weights just right, making sure things work correctly. So once you're done weighting fingers, just lock them. All right, back to our assignment. So again, you don't have to get it perfect. I want to see that you've made an effort to get it right. I don't want you to obsess about perfection. I just want to see that you took a stab at it. If it looks good, even if it's not working perfectly, that's fine. I don't want you down a rabbit hole on this one. Okay. If you're set up at home, then you've got a couple of weeks to work on this. And like I said, I'm gonna even if I'm out after the break, I will still be checking email. I'll still be looking at stuff that you're posting on Web Access, so I'll be watching you. But yeah, I'll still be looking at stuff. So please don't hesitate to email. I may not get back to you immediately. It all depends on how I'm feeling. But again, the fill-in instructors know what they're doing. The lab assistants generally have a good feel for this stuff. They can help you out. And if it gets super desperate, then just email me, and I'll see what I can do via email. Sometimes it's tough to help out via email because, you know, without being able to actually see what you're doing, it's a little tricky. But okie doke. If you want to, a good way to kind of take a run at this before you delve into your character is to use this guy. Remember, he's up on the website from last week. You can build a quick skeleton inside him and then do a little bit of weight painting practice just to kind of get a feel for it, and then jump into the actual character. I know it seems like additional time to get to the end, but you can make your mistakes on this guy a whole lot more simply than you can make them on the other guy. And it's any additional practice you get is just going to speed things along as you go. So, all right.